Hello, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Witch Cafe, your safe place to talk about anything fringe, strange, paranormal, UFOs, UAP if you're fancy. Tonight, I am honored to have Mr. Michael P. Masters on to talk about his newest book. But before I get to that, I want to say thank you to everybody in the live chat, everybody that is here today, supporting the channel and all that good stuff. First of all, thank you. Do you prefer Dr. Masters? Do you prefer Michael? What should we call you? We might
I
have
feel
a
like
lag.
you just asked me something.
Yes, sorry. We have a little bit of a lag on my end here, guys. I apologize.
I wish you could hear what I'm hearing on this end. It sounds like robotic voices.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
do-do-do-do-do-do. We were good before we went live. Now it's all. Did you ask me what kind of name I prefer?
Yes, I did. Oh, okay. So we are having internet problems today. We're trying to use a hotspot because of internet outages. So we're going to try it. And then if I can't get him back in, we will reschedule. Here we are again. Welcome back.
We should probably acknowledge to the guests that my internet service provider absolutely sucks. And if anyone's familiar with Montana geography, there's an outage from Dillon all the way up to Great Falls. So pretty much all of southwest Montana is without internet right now. So we are using a mobile hotspot for the first time in my history. I don't know. Have you ever tried this before, Priscilla?
I have not. You are the first.
All right,
So
everyone. It works fine. I mean, I can hear you perfectly now, but I thought we should get the listeners in on what's
absolutely.
going on. Yeah. Also, full disclosure, I'm getting over a cold and have laryngitis pretty bad right now. It was fine, and then like yesterday, it felt like the devil herself was deep throating me in a way I've never been deep throated before, which has been a ton of fun. But we're getting it sorted. We've got internet, and I've got some of Grandpa's old cough medicine here to help with the laryngitis. So I think we're good to go.
Awesome. Awesome. So thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you to anybody listening later. Hello, disclosure team, Curious George, study of UAPs. I got Carolina, my original hype woman in there. So guys, we're going to try this. And if the internet fails us, then we can always reschedule, but we're going to pretend like everything's fine. So I think we may have frozen. Oh, there he is. Okay. So why don't you introduce yourself? I could read your bio, but I like to hear it from the person. Who are you? What are you doing? And what do you do?
Well, I am simply an extension of the universal consciousness. There is no ego. But the body that I live in is Dr. Michael Masters, who, for the relevance of this show, got a Ph.D. in anthropology in 2009 from the Ohio State University, specialized in a number of various fields within anthropology. It's a very diverse field because humans are very complicated animals. So we sort of branch out. There's four main subfields: archaeology, biological anthropology, linguistics, and culture anthropology. And what was cool about Ohio State is they had us teach all of those, which forced you to really learn all of those perspectives, a four-field approach, as they say, which has been great for not just the research that I do related to the eye and the face and visual acuity issues in human populations and things like that, but just for understanding humanity and sort of getting a broader sense of who we are in a very material and cosmic sense, I guess. So I feel fortunate in that respect. Turned my attention more to the UFO question in 2012. Started writing my first book, Identified Flying Objects, which came out in 2019. And it was kind of a very, I was still very much looking at things through a materialist lens. They force you through that in biology, evolutionary anatomy, and things that's very tangible, genetics, quantitative methods, statistics, and whatnot. And the UFO phenomenon can't be understood with that alone. So it kind of forced me into other areas of investigation. And that was the impetus for the second book, which focuses more on the abductee phenomenon, contactees, as part of the UFO question. And yeah, it sort of opened up a ton of new questions. The more you look into this, the more you just come away. It's like one step forward, two steps back, but your two steps back are just extra questions that then you can put toward the next step forward, trying to get answers. And then the last book I wrote just came out about a month ago, called Revelation, The Future Human Past, which looks at this question of the cataclysm that Frank Milburn and Ross Coulthart and others have been talking about, where you have these two competing future human groups. And yeah, explores a lot of questions related to that, what that might look like as a real scenario in the context of this time travel future human scenario, but then also looking at politics and religion and economic systems. It's a very satirical book, sort of a throwback to the 1600s with early satire. But yeah, the three of those kind of offer a little something different for everyone with regard to this question of whether or not UFOs and aliens could potentially be our distant descendants or even proximate descendants coming back through time to study their own past.
Yes,
That was probably way longer than you wanted,
no,
wasn't it?
not at all. Not at all. No, you're the guest. Whatever you say, and we love it. So that's very interesting. I loved all three of your books, and the third one, the most recent one, Revelations, a little bit different the way you wrote it. Some of my like impressions from it, not that you asked, but it's a pretty wild book. Like, I read a lot of things. I don't read a lot of fiction, so this held my interest for a while, which was great. The sense of humor, it's very dry
Okay.
and raw. I love it. I was laughing so many times during it. And, obviously by myself, like in a dark room, reading your book on Kindle, just laughing. And then thank you for not being afraid to write about like controversial topics and using controversial things, which I don't think are controversial, but most people do. The bringing up of like politics, financial politics, even the talking about time travel and these entities being us from the future, some people might consider out there. But there's a lot of people that think that, and you covered that in your second book, which I will ask about as well because I've read all of them. So before we get into this, how did you come up with the cover concept art of this particular book, Revelation, The Future Human Past?
Oh, yeah, that was a fun collab with Dan Zetterstrom and Olaf Rockner. I put out an ISO on UFO Twitter looking for someone to help me with the design. I had the idea, the concept, and then I didn't have the skill set. I did the cover design for my first two books, but I wanted this one to be an original piece of art. And turns out there are a ton of bots on Twitter. When you put the words graphic designer and ISO in the same place, you just get bombarded with scammers. As it turns out, they're all scammers. And I was hoping to work with somebody in the UFO community who knows sort of why the concept was being developed the way it was. And these guys are great. I sort of sketched out very crudely the idea, Jesus kind of hanging in the air underneath a UFO, and the birth with the three wise men following a UFO instead of a star, which is probably what it actually was in the first place. And just because it's a main theme throughout, it's looking at Christianity through the lens of future human meddling, essentially, or at least interjecting certain things into the past that became religions, cults that eventually became religions. The expression in religious studies is a religion is just cult plus time. And yeah, if you see stuff like this happening, you're obviously going to see it as miraculous and develop your worldview around it. And I think that's a lot of what happened with regard to many religions. And a lot of other people have talked about this as well. So, it's somewhat controversial to say that, obviously, which is a big part of why this is a fiction novel, because you can explore those things without it necessarily tarnishing your name with regard to academic credentials and whatnot, even though it probably will anyway. So yeah, I had that idea because it's a major theme in the book, and passed it over to Dan and Olaf, and they added so much cool stuff, like Jesus throwing the bird underneath the UFO. That was all them. Kind of a leap too, because I don't. There's no way they could have read. There's one way they could have read the manuscript, a preprint of it. But yeah, they got the vibe, I guess, and threw that in there. Dan says there's a bunch of other Easter eggs in it. I still haven't gotten a chance to talk to him about what those are, but I'm excited to find out, because it was super fun. Then both of them, Olaf, doing a lot of the design and the graphic work and the artistry, the drawing. I feel like it came together pretty well.
Absolutely. And they're both really good friends of mine. Dan, I was in Colombia with, I was in New York with him. And he's
For
him and Olaf are
Phenomenology. Is that
yes,
the show?
sir. Yeah. So he's very thoughtful with the things everything that he works on has some sort of symbolism. And he was like that. And then him and Olaf joined forces for Graham Rendell's books. And
Nice.
I was just blown away. And they are both in, I have a UAP book club because we're nerds. And
cool.
we meet from time to time and do a panel on a book. So we vote on the book and then we do the panel, but they're both there usually,
Awesome.
as part of the panel. So that's fun. But yeah, the artwork came out amazing.
It felt like one of those sort of cosmic entanglement things where,
Absolutely.
I put it out there and the exact right people came together to create the thing that always was. It was really great working with them. Highly recommend 33 ounce.
Absolutely, guys.
33 ounce creative, I think is what they're called.
So.
Yeah,
we'll get that link in there.
Very broad range of skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. And their art is just it's rare to see two artists work together and create something so cohesive between two people. Hey, Alien Girl. We got Alien Girl in the chat. Thank you for showing up. We love you. So I want to go over something really quick before we start talking about the book. And I think I've said that 3 times. But, this particular title has a subtitle, a satirical time travel science fiction novel. Not everybody's going to be familiar with satire. So can you give a little kind of what is satire and why did you choose to write it in that style besides everything you just mentioned?
I think I got that. Again, I'm hearing robot voices with 60% of
It's
what
actually
you say.
me.
So I'm
I'm
trying
actually
to
a
pick
robot.
out words
So,
to
yeah.
form.
What is
damn it,
satire?
that makes this really difficult. Can you speak human language, please?
I'm an
No,
AI.
it's definitely the connection. Are you sure I'm not chunking on your
You're
side?
not.
I'm not
You're
chunking
not
it
at
all
all.
over there.
Not at all. So what is satire?
Okay.
Why
I
did
think
you
you
decide
said
that?
no. But I do think I understood the question. Why choose satire? Oh, one of my favorite loves in this physical reality is comedy. And that's how you get away with things. That's how you draw attention to fucked up shit happening.
No. Oh, it was just about to get good, guys. We've got the circle of doom happening. So let's see if we can reconnect him. If you're listening to audio, we have some power or some Wi-Fi outage, and let me add him back in. Okay, you're back, but no audio this time. Oh no.
I just thought it'd be fun if I came back in pretending like I never stopped talking, but without audio.
You got me. I was like,
sketch
oh,
comedy
no.
happening.
But then
over here.
He like
No, I'm just kidding.
divided himself and came back tricking me. So so you said
Yeah, I
it's
tricked you. I
you did.
tricked
He
you.
got me, guys.
It's the 6-year-old in me. It never went away. I grew up with 5 sisters, and I was always the jokester in
Holy
the
cow.
bunch. And now I'm a dad, so that's been combined
Ugh.
with cheesy dad humor. So it's just it's a slippery slope of bad comedy. But no, what I was saying is that I do love comedy, and I always have. I grew up, going to bed watching David Letterman and Johnny Carson, though I barely remember that because I was really little. All the late night shows, stand-up comedians, and I just that you can, like, George Carlin was great at it, really drawing attention to important sociological, anthropological concepts, but doing it in a way that's funny, but you're still forced to think about it, and you still learn something from it. So, and looking back on Flatland, for instance, nobody even realizes that Flatland was political satire. You have to do it in a way that allows you to call attention to things, but subtly, and parts of this book are a little more overt than subtle, but for the most part, it's political, economic, religious satire, drawing attention to rampant hypocrisies across all of those, and potentially what the ramifications of that are, potentially the destruction of this earth and of humanity if we don't step outside of ego and address the fact that this system is unsustainable. And the more we focus on personal gain without recognizing that we share this planet and we share a consciousness, I think we're really doomed. And I think it's important to talk about that. And occasionally it does get mentioned in certain circles. It's talked about it all the time with regard to.
Sorry about this, guys. So we'll see if he comes back, and we'll see if he tricks me this time. It should be fun. But the book, guys, if you have not checked it out yet, you definitely to get into it, and just it's different than the other 2 books. But it is a fiction that will hold your attention, and it will, if you're familiar with his work, it ties it all together. Let's see.
I moved the phone right next to my wireless antenna.
Perfect.
I don't know if that'll help. And I would apologize to the guests for these cutouts, but it's actually probably a benefit.
Yeah. I mean, everything happens, right?
I get a little sometimes, so that cuts me off and forces me into little sound bites.
Well, you didn't trick me this time.
I asked, shut the fuck up a little bit from time to time.
No, you're absolutely fine. You're the guest. You should be allowed to talk, right? So, yeah, your dad jokes went over well, just so you know. Everybody loves dad jokes in the chat.
Oh,
All right.
I mean, it is a pretty basic form of humor, but every now and then you can squeeze out a crowd pleaser,
It's the cheese in it, though. You're just like, that was an epic dad joke. Like, it's so not
and
funny,
a lot
but
of
I'm
times
dying.
yeah, and it draws from some sort of awareness that comes with parenthood and seeing the world in a different way, weaving things together. I appreciate dad jokes too. I follow a lot of Instagram and Twitter pages that are like really stupid dad stuff like that.
Well, I do the equivalent to mom stuff, so it's all right. Parenting, you had to find the comedy in it for sure. So speaking of comedy, I love your sense of humor in the book, which I mentioned, the raw nature of the characters. I kept picturing initially Dordogne as like a French Barbarella, and some of you might be too young to know what I'm talking about. But she just like right away, I'm just like, it's Barbarella, but French. Like that's what my mind did to her.
That's awesome.
There's a scene in the book about Jesus's dad bringing him cracticide. And if you want to know what cracticide is, guys, you kind of have to go read the book, because I highlighted
hydromorphic cracticide.
Oh, okay. Would you like to explain what that fictional
I would
drug is?
To.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about cracticide. What is cracticide? How did you come up with that? It's awesome.
I both did and didn't. So we used to go to this music festival in Southern Ohio called Appalachian Uprising, and I forget what year it was, but they got bigger bands that year, like Yonder Mountain String Band was playing, and Tony Rice and David Grisman, and like a big bunch of big name bands. And whenever that happens, you get the Fish Kids come out, and they'll stand there, and suddenly be like, mushroom chocolates, I've got. And one guy was parodying all of that, standing in the main area of where everybody comes through, coming and going to the stage from the campground. And he was just making up the funniest names for fake drugs. And one and I just started cracking up. I'm like, that's the funniest name. Like, it combines a lot of things that are elements of specific drugs and just makes nonsense out of it. So that stuck with me, and 20 years since that festival. So I threw that in there, mostly as an inside joke for my friends that were with me at that festival, who I knew would bust up.
See, YouTube doesn't like us talking about Crackicide, guys. There's like this whole scene in the book where this Crackicide is explained in the book as like every crazy drug. And in the description in the book, the drug ends with "and a pinch of ayahuasca." And if you've ever, or if you're familiar with ayahuasca or have experienced it, holy cow, like. But there's a whole scene where Jesus
All
is
of
taking
those, and
this.
it's also describing, it's also describing how you make crack, essentially, as you kind of boil it down in aluminum foil. So yeah, there's a lot of subtle things in there. Tons of
the
drugs, sex,
apple.
and UFOs.
Yeah, it's basically it's a man's dream too,
It
because
was a
this
fun
main
one to
character
write. And
thinks he's the
actually,
only one.
yeah, one of the impetuses for this book was I gave a talk at the Esalen Institute, California, over the summer, and one of the co-founders of the place, Michael Murphy, came up after my talk, and he was like reinvigorated. He's like, I'd given up on UFOs. I thought it was all bullshit. What you said makes sense. I went through kind of the whole spiel about time traveling future humans and whatnot. And then he asked me, after we talked about that for a bit, he's like, is there any study of just sex and music? And I was like, I don't know. That's a damn good question. I love both of those things, so I'll find out. And I went to all of these different databases, New Fork and MUFON, and just tried to do a content analysis, but hardly anything came up. So I was like, well, I'll just write a book that explores those things, kind of a what if, with because sex is obviously a physical thing, but it's very much a spiritual connection too, if you pay attention to that. And that's really what I wanted to come through this book, is that it's not just about getting your rocks off or whatever. It's about like forming these unions and having, like, transcending ego with another person through that act, and all of the endorphins and chemicals that come with that, and then having fun with it. I had a whole lot of fun with that part of it.
Oh, absolutely.
A
The first
sexual
one.
book. I think
Yeah.
someone said it's like the Danielle Steele of UFO books or something like that.
I'm reading it and I'm like, whoa, this is happening. Okay, well, we're going to keep reading it because, it's exciting. And also, you're right. Like, it's not like at first you're like, okay, a sex scene. But then you do get into like the connection between these three beings or these three people, and how it's not just like for pleasure. So you nailed that. If that was your goal, for sure. But this book is kind of like, it's seriously one of the most wild books I've ever read. I think he froze, but I mean that like in a great way. So let's see. Yep, he froze. Okay, so the book, guys, it has a lot of, like he said, like sexual content in it. This is sort of, this happens in experiences with people. There's a lot of sexual experiences revolving like abductions. So I like that he did not shy away from talking about that. And I'm just going to talk about the book while we're waiting for him to come back. Within the book, he has a reference like well-known UFO events and topics. So throughout it, you'll find him making these sort of like references to specific UFO cases. Like, I was just letting the audience know that you have sort of like referenced within the book specific UFO cases. Like there's a point where the character says, something about buckwheat pancakes. And if you're a UFO person, you know where that came from. so, so buckwheat
There's a
pancakes are
ton
apparently
of those, and
universal.
it was
There
written for
is.
people. Yeah, it was written for people in the UFO community to get those jokes. I was hoping it would be readable and available to people outside the community too, who maybe like want to know things, because I don't feel like I put anything in there that's not accurate. Like I think there's even some tidbits in there about like the physics of how they put people through walls and ceilings and stuff that makes a lot of sense. It's largely drawn from quantum mechanics and partly Eric Wargo's research as well, where the timeless photon already knows its destination, and so you're able to mitigate decoherence in this little space within that. Various things like that, but yeah, I know like the Antonio Villas Boas is mentioned a couple of times without saying his name. Yeah, there's a ton of Easter eggs in there related to UFOs, also movies, songs. It's just yeah, and I'm glad you pointed out too that it's more of a, I guess you'd say, conversational type book, which I wasn't
Yes.
sure necessarily how to circle that square at first, because I guess it's not normal. I found a book that is like that, fortunately, at the right time when we were formatting in order to make sense of it. But what's fun about that is, like you said, you pictured Dordogne as a French Barbarella. Like I want everybody to picture these characters the way they want to, you know. And I think there's some creative freedom for the reader in that too. Like you get a sense of who they are, you get a sense of where they are and what that environment's like. But as far as the actual description, like I hate that about narration in books, and I wanted to get rid of all of that and have it be more conversational. But with that said, one thing I've realized is that it's meant to be read at a tender adagio. It's meant to be kind of slowly consumed. A lot of people just read books, like they just read. I've got a friend who who buys the audiobook and the hard copy and turns the audio all the way up to ×3. He might be listening right now, and if he is, he knows who he is, and he's a great guy. And then reads along with it at 3 times the speed that the author is reading it. Now I'm like, that's crazy. How the hell fast does your mind even do that? But this book's meant to be read slowly, like a conversation unfolding between people. And obviously it's faster at times when they're arguing, they're fighting. It's slower at times when they're, I don't know, fucking or doing whatever. But it's definitely meant to be sort of read in a slower pace than a lot of books, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Sorry, Kat. The latest book of his is called Revelation: The Future Human Past. That's the first title, and then it's a satirical time travel science fiction novel. That's the full title. But I have his information in the description, so you should be able to go link to that, and I'll add the Amazon, his author's page from Amazon as well. That way, you guys can just go buy all his books. So you did. We froze again. So yes. I hope that answers your question, Kat. I'm going to go through and kind of sort of these comments while I'm waiting for him to unfreeze.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I can hear you.
Nothing that you're saying.
I was
can
just
hear me?
telling.
I still can't believe.
Oh my goodness. All right, we've got the circle, guys. The circle. X-rated show. Disclosure team. Read the book, Vinny. It'll. It is X-rated. I do put explicit on all my shows because I let people say bad words. So like, I do allow for people to, speak freely.
Did I say bad words?
No, it's totally fine. No, if you did say bad words, I'm not monetized. It doesn't matter to me. But Vinny's joking. He says X-rated show.
Well, I mean, if you read the book, you'll get
That's what I told him. I was like, Vinny, I think you've been on Vinny's show. You've been on Disclosure Team before, I think.
Yeah, I think a few times, 3 times.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. So, this is
I probably didn't say bad words on his show. though,
Oh
because
yeah,
I'm
Vinny's a proper guy. All right. This
well,
is
if we're
just a
talking
cafe, all
about
right?
and if we're talking about my first two books, I'm gonna leave out
Right.
the fucks and the shits and stuff. But
Oh no, this book was
the last
very
book, I think, you gotta stay true to it. So I'm not saying I'm like in character. I kind of always talk like that, to be honest. And most
potty
people do,
mouth.
like most of my friends, even
Yeah,
around our kids, my buddy will
same.
be like, "Oh, this fucking bullshit thing," and I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." Because they're just a lot of kids are raised in that environment. These are like
Yeah.
professional engineers and uh, water engineers, I guess he is specifically. But yeah, I just think it's a different world, and I kind of wrote the book to appeal to people like that too, because it's real, it's real conversation. I was fishing with a buddy of mine the other day, and I counted about every fourth word he said was fuck. And I'm like, man, I doubt he even knows he's doing that.
No,
That's just how people talk, at least in my friend circle. I guess we're all just a bunch of potty mouth,
it's
weed
all right.
token, whiskey drinking fools. But I don't know.
That's how we are here too. I know it's not very ladylike to say the F word. I know a lot of words, but it's just I'm not mad when I'm saying the F word. I'm not. It's just another word to me, which probably like
Exactly.
I watch myself around other parents because I don't want to say it in front of other people's kids if like they don't
If
like
they're
it.
squares, yeah.
Yeah, which the military census is some pretty conservative areas, so like I do behave in public for the most part, but
Yeah, and we all
you know,
should, and that's what I taught my kids. I tell this story in my class sometimes when we're talking about language and like the social norms, mores, and folkways associated with it. And I remember going skiing with my buddy in grad school. He was in law school, but we drove out to Colorado because his parents had a friend who had a cabin. I think it was his uncle, and we're sitting there at dinner, and like the dad was razzing on his daughter, who was probably like 12 or 13, and she was like, "Suck a royal fucking dick, dad." And I just looked over, everybody's laughing. I look over like, whoa. And the mom, gets this look on her face. She's like, Morgan, good one. Yeah. And she's like, praising her for the way she manipulated those words. And so the anthropologist in me was like, how does that work? I was still a decade off from having kids, but we all do the same thing now. I think it's just sort of a part of our collective culture that you teach the kids exactly what you just said, where it's like, you don't say this in this place or in front of these people, and respect other people's boundaries. Your language still affects them and affects the situation. So respect them and don't use that language. But if it's, a comfortable group of people and everybody's sharing the energy, then game on.
I totally agree, and that's how I am too. So, what are you drinking? We have a question from Vinny, a very serious one. Where is it? There it is. Is that whiskey or is it bourbon? It,
It is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So all of the above is Elijah
oh,
Craig. And like I said before, I don't know, but I got the laryngitis
it's
real
medicine,
bad. So
guys.
it's grandpa's cough medicine. It's not just whiskey. It's the Viagra of laryngitis. It's
That would be bad though if it was a Viagra of laryngitis. Might it make it
yeah,
more?
maybe that wasn't the best. I just picked whatever word came to mind, but no, that could be bad. I don't know. I'd have an Adam's apple like George Clooney though,
Just
if
be
we let
there all
that
the time.
roll. Yeah, like knocking stuff over on my desk with it. That could actually be kind of dangerous.
Kentucky
I'm also wearing
representing.
these
Yeah.
headphones. I don't usually wear these headphones, but it allows me to easily mute when I have to cough, so your listeners don't have to deal with that.
It's all right. I
Um,
think they'll understand. I just came from Kentucky and we tried all sorts of cool bourbon. I lived there for 3 years, so we
Yeah, they're
tried them
really
all.
good. That's my favorite region. It's not great for the environment, but
No.
it is delicious to consume. I lived in the Cognac region of France too. I worked at
Oh, wow.
a 150,000-year-old Neanderthal site there, and I'd never even heard of cognac. I thought it was like a liqueur, like a foofy drink.
Yeah,
Turns
it
out
sounds
it's like
fancy.
their equivalent of bourbon, but they distill wine instead of
Mm.
distilling like corn mash or whatever wheat mash, and it's delicious. If I haven't been able to afford it for the last year because I've been on sabbatical, but when I can, I'll definitely hit up that cognac. It's
Yeah.
tasty.
Yeah, for
It's Whitley
sure.
Strieber's drink too. Me and Whitley
Oh,
shared a
is it?
cognac in Houston last year.
Nice. I got to meet him in New York for a J. Christopher King's conference and James
Yeah,
Angela's conference. I got to introduce him, and I was just like, because like
yeah,
as
he's
an early,
awesome.
he's super cool. As an early experiencer, like his books is one of the first ones I was like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah,
this is
for
crazy.
a lot of people, it's so important for shifting the
Absolutely.
zeitgeist.
So
And
I
he's
wanted.
just a lovely man too, if I
Oh
could put
yeah,
that out
yeah,
there.
very sweet, very sweet. So I liked in your book how you put, some strong financial political statements in there, and it seemed like you were pretty passionate about it. Like these people only were able to go to the moon base because they were wealthy and they could kind of like they wanted to ensure their, they wanted to escape the planet's nuclear war, but use time travel technology to ensure that they would stay rich in the future. Is that kind of and we kind of think that's going to happen when we hear about like a space commerce. We think only the rich people would be able to do it. So, do you want to talk a little bit about your viewpoints on that?
Yeah, I'd also like to point out this has gotten way easier because I can hear what you're saying now.
Yay!
There was a time when I was getting like maybe 20% and would just have to guess, but I put the phone up on a shelf and I moved my antenna right below it. So,
I'm trying to like
um,
zap the thoughts into your brain too at the same
well, I
time.
was also, yeah, I was telepathying with you, but it's very intrusive, so I didn't want to come out and say that. Yeah, so like I said, teaching the culture anthropology, the archaeology, I taught a class for many years at Ohio State, a similar one at Columbus State Community College, and then at Montana Tech for many years, called Culture Change and Global Development. That's about the way in which we interact economically and therefore politically, because the two are inseparable in a national and international context. And a big part of that is the effects on the environment, externalities, things like that. The way it affects people. You have people getting rich off of the poorest people who stay poor. The diamond mines in South Africa, Zimbabwe, the Niger Delta region with shell and oil extraction. You have all of these people getting a lot of money on the backs of very poor people who live on top of that. And it's just a legacy of colonialism and imperialism. So, having studied that and taught about it for many years, it obviously plays into this question. If we're talking about a cataclysm, if we're talking about something that might be a real event that future people are coming back to try to mitigate or at least tease out who's on which side, who can come, who cannot, um, it's important to have that conversation because it does come down to ego. Do you see you and what you get as being worth sacrificing them and what they get? But if we see ourselves as a collective whole, all of that disappears. And I know it sounds kind of foo-foo and super spiritual and whatnot, but I've come to believe that's the reality of the situation that we're talking about. Maybe even a line being drawn in the sand where there's just an obvious awareness that it is unsustainable. But what's the best way forward, And so this book sort of explores that as a main theme. There's other themes as well, but that is definitely a running theme throughout the book. It starts with that, it ends with that. And the main character is aware of it, but also grappling with it himself, and as are the people he's interacting with on this time travel mission. So yeah, it's bringing attention to a real challenge that may be a very real part of the struggle that we might all have to face at some point in the near future, and if not ours, our children's future at least.
Great answer. Yeah, I was noticing that, and you can tell when somebody's writing with passion. So I was like, this is something, the author is knowledgeable and passionate about, it seems.
There
There's a
were a
few,
couple of points where I probably should have even checked myself on that a little bit.
but it fit with the main character, though. The main character is very passionate in many ways.
And
So
conflicted too.
absolutely.
Yeah, he's definitely, but there was one line, I won't read it back, but I could probably, because it was stuck with me too. I was like,
Well,
wow,
then
where
read
did
it
that come from? Um
or give us the, the gist of it.
It was yeah, it was something about how the red pill's a suppository, so bend over so we can shove it up your ass with our shiny platinum cocks, something, something, something. But without context, that means nothing. It just sounds like an angry tirade. But
Yeah.
within the context of this very serious political and economic discussion between two people, and it's hard to talk about this without giving away,
Yeah, yeah.
important spoilers, but between two people who at that moment in the book were staunchly opposed in their political views. And that was another important thing that I was trying to do, is show that, this political divide that's so palpable, it really largely stems from economics too, and a lack of education, and religion is a huge part of it. But showing that a lot of that's unnecessary, or just being manipulated into having this division, because it's a divide and conquer strategy. It's the same thing the Brits used against the people of India, and the people of Kenya, and we used in Iraq. There's so many examples of this divide and conquer strategy because it works, and we're still a victim of it today.
Absolutely. Great answer again. And yeah, you have to read the book, guys. If somebody goes, "What the F?" or "WTF," you have to read the book, Bob, because if you didn't read the book, then that's going to sound very insane to you. There's a couple
Yeah, a
of
lot of this
terms.
probably does. This is the first time I've really gotten into it. I was on with Kelly Chase on the
Love
UFO
her.
rabbit hole, and we sort of, talked about it, but we didn't really go deep into it. This is the
Yeah.
first chance I've had. I'm glad we're doing this,
Mhm.
because yeah, it's a nuanced book. It's not
Yeah.
supposed to be something you pick up and read and go, "Wee, that was fun."
Yeah.
There's
It makes you think.
there's things to think about in there, and not in a way
Absolutely.
that I hope, not in a way that comes across as like preachy or anything,
No.
because that's not the purpose of it. It's satire. It's to draw attention to things that a lot of us just don't even pay attention to, or shrug off, even if we're like, "Oh, that seems weird."
Yeah. Yeah. That was it, and it gives that vibe. So you achieved that. And I did the reason I read both books, and I obviously have a million questions about extratempestrial model too. But since you talked about that a lot on hers, so I wanted to focus on this book. I also like to focus on like the author's latest book first, and then kind of like work backwards into the other ones. But I would say like reading the first two kind of helped with some of the kind of like a key term. I don't want to say key terms. It sounds like I'm in class, but one of those terms in the books, like for example, the great filter. Not everybody, if you just pick up this book and read it, not everybody's going to know what that is, right? So, how would you explain the great filter that's mentioned throughout this book several times?
Uh, let's see. I don't know if I can necessarily say how it applies to this book, because that would be definitely a spoiler alert type situation. But yeah, there's this question about, in Fermi's paradox and the Drake equation, like why we don't see extraterrestrials all the time, and a big part of that is, can they get through this filter that's inevitable when you have civilization, and um especially when that civilization is so ego driven, and driven by profit, personal profit gain, nepotism, passing that on. It was a big point in this book too, is focusing on the generational wealth, and not just individual achievement, but all of those who get it kicked down to them, and what they do with it. And so yeah, it's about whether civilizations can survive much past that ability to destroy themselves. And here in this book, it's much more complex than that. One thing, I guess, a little maybe teaser, possibly slightly a spoiler, is that there is a difference in who says the Great War and who says the Great Filter. It's somewhat revealing, but I can't say why that is,
Yeah.
because there is a twist at the end that shows that difference. But it is something that's kind of subtle, that if you pay attention to it, you'll be like, that's wonder where this is going. But yeah, no, it is a real question. And like most of this book, there's a lot of real questions in there related to the UFO phenomenon. If this thing with Coulthard and Milburn and CIA informants is true, then a lot of this book's probably true, to be honest. So I don't know. Time will tell, I guess. I hope parts of it aren't true, but we can't help but think if what is coming out of these places and from these sources is accurate, then there's going to be some pretty serious things that happen, and most likely what will be our lifetime.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to give away anything, but the book definitely has like a good twist that I didn't really I was hoping was coming towards the end, but it wasn't something that I could have like guessed ahead of time. I was just like, please let this, like when everything happens at the end. But anyways, guys, I don't
I
want to give
think I
away
know
too
what
much.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife
Hmm.
said the same thing.
Yeah, it's so
A
that's
couple
fun as
people
a
did
reader to
actually.
have happen. Like you have because like sometimes you're reading a book, you're like, oh great, this is gonna happen, but it wasn't like that. So I
No,
wanted to talk about
I don't think most people could guess the
no,
ending, at least not
no.
the last two chapters. But anyway,
It's
sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. So I wanted to talk about something that you wrote about in the book referring to time travel. It's a term causal loop. What is a causal loop?
Right, so it's also known as the Bootstrap Paradox because that's just what it's called, but it's actually not a paradox whatsoever, and it's likely what's happening right now, and and something that still cracks me up. They have really intelligent people looking at these reverse engineering programs, crash retrieval programs, and whatnot, and they're like, wow, we've had this technology at our disposal, and we're very primitive little monkeys when we actually acquired it. But we've had 70, potentially 90 years with the Italy thing that's come out recently. I don't know how many people were aware of that, but it was news to me. Um, Potentially 90 years to figure out how this stuff works and what the ramifications of that are is that eventually we will have that technology and we will be the ones using it. And these craft clearly have the ability to manipulate space time and control it at will, seemingly, indicating that space time as we understand it is not accurate. So there's probably a lot more going on with regard to that question of what 4D space time actually is. But so this is a good example of how that works, where if we do get to the point where this is a time machine and we start using it, we could be the ones that come back and crash it, and then they reverse engineer it and they make it. So the reason why it's called a paradox is because in that scenario, and in the extratempestrial model, I used the example of, I think, someone writing a dissertation, maybe, or maybe that was my first book. I don't remember where I put it. But it's just the simple idea that an idea or a technology is conveyed to someone in the past. It's used for a specific purpose, and then they or someone else becomes the one that takes it back and interjects it into the past. And so it's this consistent loop of cause and effect. But the thing that gets people's panties all up in a bunch is that we're used to thinking of time as a past cause and a future effect because we have this false notion of linear time. None of that matters in the context of a time machine. You can have a future cause and a past effect. So it's this loop that forms, and that question of who created it becomes moot. It's nonsense. It's always existed. The people in the future didn't create it because they reverse engineer. The people in the past didn't create it because it was given to them inadvertently or intentionally. And both of those have been coming out in the Grush statements that they were crashed and landed. And there's a lot of questions that stem from that. Is what was that was given and why? Why to that group and not another group? What was the reasoning behind that? Did it always happen? So that might be an example too. Like they had always done that with this group to maybe try to make it even for the other. uh I don't even know how far to go into that because it does border on conspiracy. But
Yeah.
what if we're not? What if we're not all fighting with each other? What if we're not? What if we haven't been fighting with Russia this whole time? What if the Chinese aren't our adversaries? Have we ever actually gone to war with them? It's only recently that they even came in to be the largest economic powerhouse in the nation. And probably a little salty about that. And all the tiny dick guys in the top are like, oh no, the Chinese are taking over. But what if, that's just something that we've sort of portrayed because you can sell a lot more weapons to people if you have a fake enemy. We Unfortunately, a lot of people have died because of that. There's these proxy wars that have been fought all over the world largely between Russia and the US. They make a butt ton of money by letting others use their weapons that they sold to kill people. Getting off track here a little bit. I'm sorry about that.
Don't be sorry.
But the issue at hand is that we might not have it might not all be crash retrieval. Even if it is time travelers, all of that's consistent. There's no paradox there. It's this causal loop, it's this bootstrap, but it's not. And I used that subtly in my last book a few times. We're pulling ourselves up by the bootstrap again as like an homage to that bootstrap paradox nomenclature. But just one thing I'll say before I get off my little tangent here. I think it's probably unfortunate that the internet's not kicking me off occasionally anymore because I am getting long-winded again. Is think about, the moon. We had this space race. We were trying to go to the moon, and the whole idea was that we'd set up these civilizations on the moon. It was about who could get there first, who could colonize the moon. And we were doing this Sputnik, and then there's Apollo missions and the Luna missions in Russia. And we're doing it. And then all of a sudden just stopped. And we're working with the Russians on something that's orbiting Earth, the same way the moon is, but we're like friends on this little box that's flying around the Earth. But meanwhile, down on Earth, we're giving weapons to people to kill each other because we hate the Russians and they hate us. We play hockey games and we won the hockey game, which is still cool. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just much more complicated, especially if you look at it in the context of what's coming out now with these crash retrievals, because it's all potentially part of that same question, that we are talking about causal loops, that we are talking about bootstraps. And what does that mean when there are certain nations who have the ability to reverse engineer that stuff? And obviously Russia does. They've had engineers, physicists who have been working on this stuff for eons. Igor Novikov, one of my favorite physicists and authors on this question, where I learned most of these concepts, is Russian, and of course the Chinese do too. So, you maybe not going to crash into some island in Papua New Guinea where there's 500 people that have no technology. You're not going to gift them a craft. It may be an intentional thing to spread the wealth, because if you're coming back from the future, obviously you'd think you'd want to help your nation. But in that future, there's probably no concept of nation. If there's no concept of ego, there's absolutely no concept of a material space that you and others own that you kill each other over. It's nonsense. It's probably, they look back on us as such children, such primitive little apes. But there is still the need, if you are seeding your technology into the future, to give it to people that can actually build it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that one got away from me. Sorry
No, don't apologize. No. The one rule here, which it should be a rule, because I personally love it when people go off on tangents, especially authors and researchers, because they're always interesting. So it's not like you're going off on some crazy tangent that doesn't make sense. Oh, sorry.
It sounded crazy to me. The cops are coming for you too. So
yeah, I called the police on you. They're gonna bilocate from here to you.
I'm fine with that.
I live in Baltimore on a busy street, so that thing it's either that or like fireworks sounds or gunshot sounds. But yeah, so
I'm cool. We can just roll with it. Like you do a TV shoot, and then the audio person in the back's like, gotta redo that. I'm like, oh,
no,
seriously.
No, it's just, this is like a laid back, it's a cafe. Like my whole envision is just like a virtual cafe where we have like these deep conversations, and it's a conversation. It's not like, okay, sir, I asked you this question, get back to it. It's not going to be like that. If you haven't noticed.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked at all at the beginning because I couldn't hear any of your questions anyway.
But you figured it out, you took every ninth word and you actually answered the question. So maybe you can read lips. I don't know.
Vibing with your consciousness in the ethereal
I was zapping
space.
It to you.
We pulled it off.
Yeah, for sure. I think we did well. So I think that the final term I have a question about, because we're coming up on the hour, and you wrote a whole book about this. But to people listening to this and people that maybe only bought your latest book and didn't read the other ones, what is the Extratempestrial Model? What is that?
Yeah, I've gotten the sense that people now think that was my first book, which is probably good because a lot of people thought my first book was too technical, which I did intentionally.
No, it was great.
but also to make it readable. It was a fine line. It was a very fine line, but I had a lot of people to help, and I also had 7 years to write that one, so I took my time with it and I tried to make it readable. But it is dense. But this is, yeah, the extratempestrial model was a term I coined leading up to the publication of my first book, because I felt like we need another word, one that could be associated with extraterrestrials, which is all that did is take out the ter, which means earth, and insert the Latin root temp, which means time, to show that they're outside of time instead of being outside of earth, which they could be both of those things. I don't see those as mutually exclusive at all. And there's a way they can be extraterrestrial and still have their origins here on this planet if we do start to become interstellar ourselves. So it was, there's been other words: chrononauts, UFO nauts, tempo nauts, I believe I've even seen. But I wanted to have one that was like wrapped around, encased by, circumscribed by one that is familiar, so it was less of a leap.
Yes, and you have to read that book too. It's great. But, I enjoyed the technical nature of your first book. I'm also like kind of a nerd when it comes to that. I'm still working on my Bachelor of Science. I decided to have kids and just like take it, like just draw it out forever, I
There's
guess.
no rush. Yeah, you can do that on your own time. Just
Yeah, and
knowledge, learning. I wish I would have taken
yeah,
longer with it, because just having, I mean, the UFO phenomenon is great because it challenges, I
right.
think, I started this interview by saying that. But no, there's absolutely no expectation on when anything should be done. Life, well, we're here on this planet in these bodies. You just got to learn all you can. There's no rate at which
Absolutely.
it's supposed to happen.
I'm trying to remember that. So yes, I almost got sucked into biological anthropology because I had an amazing professor, and she was just like, I just fell in love with her, like the way she taught. Also
Yeah, that's
learning
cool.
about, the bone. It had everything because I was molecular bio. So like
Yeah,
it had that, but it also had like bones and like the history
yeah.
of humans,
Comparative
and
anatomy,
loved it,
genetics,
loved it. So,
primatology,
oh yeah,
paleoanthropology. It's funny to hear you say that because I had the absolute opposite experience.
you're
I
like, no, I want to do it.
No, I didn't. I decided to switch my sophomore year from physics and astronomy to biological anthropology, and I had the absolute worst professor you could ever ask for. This angry old Russian guy who's just completely over it. But I knew I wanted to do this. I felt compelled to. It was part of this precognitive thing I've talked about
Yeah.
many times before. So I knew I was going to do it. I got like a C minus in the class. I remember talking to my mom one time, and she was like, "So really, biological anthropology? That's what you want to do?" Uh-huh. Declared my major. Yep, doing that. It's like C minus though. That's it's like it's a hard class. It's hard. I heard Dak Shepard talk about this too. He was interviewing Tony Stark. Who was Tony Stark? And what's his real name? Rodney
Yeah.
Dangerfield, or no?
Rodney.
That's
Oh
not
my
even
gosh.
close.
You know,
Oh, now that's in your brain too. I just
you
implanted a
you
brain
incepted
worm.
me. How dare you? Again.
He's got the car show too.
Oh my
Something.
gosh. Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, that one. Wow, that's way off there. But he was interviewing him, and they were talking about anthropology, because he does have a degree in anthropology, but he was like, shit was hard. Like biological anthropology was
Really?
really hard. And yeah, no, it is. And it
I
was,
loved
and it
it.
continues to be. But me too.
Uh-oh. We lost audio. Okay, we lost audio. Robert Downey Jr. I'm gonna say hi to some people while we wait for him to unfreeze. Mine Fort, hello. Bob, livening up the chat as usual. I always expect it and appreciate it. Who else is there? Hello, Sylvain. When he comes back, there he is. We lost you.
I'm
The
back, but
universe.
can you hear me?
I can hear you. The
Okay.
universe was like, zip it. I don't know why. We
Yeah,
were enjoying
Robert
it.
Downey Jr. is off limits. We can talk about how the U.S. collaborates with Russia secretly, but as soon as
We
we
could talk
talk
about
about
shoving
Tony
red pills at
Stark,
people. Yeah.
yeah, you've crossed the line there, my friend.
They got bored. That's all. They're like, oh, Robert Downey. Next.
Yeah, he's doing pop culture references. He clearly has nothing else to say. But no, it's a fascinating field. It's allowed me to travel. It's allowed me to study ancient humans, to hold in my hand a skull of a 3.5 million-year-old ancestor, and the Neanderthal stuff in France is even around
Amazing.
here in Montana, Native American
Yeah.
artifacts, and to get a sense of who they were and how they lived. It's really been a great pursuit. So I've enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, it's amazing. In Colombia, we had the opportunity to be in some very old sites. So that was
Oh, cool.
that was just like emotional for me. Just, I can't talk about it yet. I'll talk
I
to
was
you
gonna
after.
say, is that in
It's,
any of the episodes? Because Vinny
you'll have
gave
to
me a
watch and
code
find.
for the first one. I'm
Oh,
gonna pay for
Vinny,
the second season. I'm paying for the second. I
this
told him
this is
I'd pay for it anyway. He's like, "Oh, here you go. Here's the code."
yeah, Vinny hooked it up. But yeah, I'll talk to you about it after because
All
it's
right.
in the second season.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, so yeah, it's just amazing when you get to be around something that old and ancient and connected to yourself.
Absolutely.
It's very
Yeah.
it's very emotional if you really are if you think about it. Like it's impossible to not get emotional. So I think it's
Yeah.
amazing you've gotten to
And we
study
should
all
all
that.
think about it. We should do that with everything.
Not
Like,
people do
just
though. People
being in
don't
the
like that.
present, being in the now, like
Mm,
seeing this thing, even if it's as simple as a smile on a face, or, a crescendo of a song at a music festival. I think
absolutely.
we don't practice presentism as much as we should.
It's a lifesaver when you do.
Yeah, for
I have a
sure.
few questions in the audience, if you're okay with that. I can pick
Yeah, if
one.
you add up all the times that we cut out, we're probably still
We're probably still under an
earlier
hour.
than, yeah,
All right,
that's not
so
bad.
let's see. The first one is from Curious George. Considering his background, I'd be interested if he read the alleged disclose of the biologist who analyzed alien grays. I'm not sure of the name of that person, but are you familiar with that?
Oh, there was no name. That's the problem.
Okay.
They very much intentionally did not give their name
Mm.
and explained why. And interestingly, mentioned that they would say things about themselves just after they said, yes, by the way, I did read this, as you could probably guess from my overly complex answer here. But also then called themselves out on saying they were going to scramble a lot of things so that they couldn't be identified. So why should you believe anything I say about where this place was or who I was or anything? And yeah, I did read it. It was very long. I wish it hadn't been that long. Everybody was like, "Hey, did you read this? Did you read this?" I'm looking at it. I'm like, I don't really want to. It looks so long, and I'm tired and I have a lot of stuff to do today. But I did read it. The big question is, was it AI? I don't think it was. There was way too much detail in there. It was way too specific, and it was interwoven too much. And as I think Juan, I don't know his full name, but on Twitter he's Juan, and he posts some great content, mentioned that AI, to the best of his knowledge, doesn't have the ability to make future predictions. So how could AI be talking about all of these things that are related to our future and things that will be done in the future if it's only drawing from things from the past, which I thought was a great observation. And I hadn't thought about that. The other thing is that there are a lot of very specific comments that do seem to dovetail very much with things like the alien abduction film, which was fake, but it was based on something true. And I got a lot of flack for my first book because I stated that clearly, that it was fake, but it was clearly based on something for all of these different reasons. So it's worth paying attention to. Also the Virginia case, there's some correlates with that. And again, you can make the case, well, AI is just drawing from all of these. AI is aware of that. So it's just pulling all of this information because it has access to it. But I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, it's either faked by someone who knows a butt ton about the UFO phenomenon and a butt ton about very complex genetic and gross anatomy things, or it's real. I don't see a lot of middle ground there. And I'm on the fence. I'm skeptical. What I do think is if it's real, and this was the conversation I was having with Juan when it came out the other day. If it is real, then I think what it indicates is that we get to the point where we stop making robots. We stop making them with screwdrivers and wires, we start making them with genes, and we see genes as the wires, to the extent that we're not just genetically programming, we're crafting an organism in our likeness in the same way we do now, where we're creating these robots to look like us. It's obviously genetic manipulations, obviously genetic engineering at a level beyond CRISPR and other what are very primitive technologies compared to what's happening here. But it is human. It's human DNA. It's human morphology. It's human gross anatomy. And I think that also is an indication that it is probably us in the future doing it with the thing that we have to work with here, which is our own genetic material.
Wow, I hope that answered your question, George. It seems like it would. Let's see. I have one more. I have two more. Bob Marley asks, my question is about what Dr. Michael thinks about TTSA.
I mean, I'd love to smoke a spliff with Bob Marley and talk about that sometime. TTSA is the stars thing, right?
To the Stars Academy.
Academy. I don't know. I mean, I don't really have an opinion. I reached out to them early on, before my first book came out, probably like 2017, just to try to figure out who's involved. Oh yeah, it was right after Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal and Heidi. God damn it, I can never remember her last name. But before, everybody knows what I'm talking about, the New York Times article. And and it talked about the Two Stars Academy. It's like, oh, it's these scientists that are talking about UFOs. So I wrote them, and they were like, we got our own thing going on. And I was like, cool. But then I followed what they were doing, and it seemed like this interesting mix of entertainment and actually trying to get the word out. And then in retrospect, as we've gone along and all of this very seemingly intentionally placed information has come out, what Darren King, I think neuro-linguistic programming, he calls it. And I've heard that term the first time I used it. I was like, my ears perked up, and I'm like, that's exactly what's happening here. And even with this time travel situation, you never heard about it. You know, I was pushing hard. I was going on all these shows and doing Ancient Aliens and The Unexplained, and a bunch of others. And it always got cut. It was always on the cutting room floor. But now it's like starting to be talked about more. They're not cutting me out of stuff as much as they used to. And obviously it's not about me. I'm just relating my experience to this because there seemingly is a trajectory related to this. And To the Stars, I think, was a very early, like, let's fucking do this thing. You know, we're not going to get it right, but let's fucking do this. Let's get it into the cultural zeitgeist and let's get people talking. And who better to do that than, you know, the lead singer of a popular band. I regret to inform you I've never listened to a single Blink-182 song, as my musical interests lie elsewhere. But I do respect that he's interested in it. He's doing it. He's clearly a part of this process, as are many, many others. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm happy it happened. I'm happy it exists.
I agree. I was joking around in a group chat, and they're like, oh, kick her out. She doesn't love Tom, because I didn't say anything like mean about Tom DeLonge.
Yeah.
But I wasn't exactly part of, like, I'm still like, about the whole situation.
You know what's interesting? I listened to this podcast, the guys from the Workaholics back in the day, called TII. Oh my God, why can't I remember the name of it? I listen to it every Tuesday. Weird brain fart there. In any case, they love Tom DeLonge. They talk about him all the time. They hang out with him because they're famous people. They know all of the bandmates. Like, one of them has the same tattoo as one of the bandmates. But one time UFOs came up.
Nice.
And they just all dropped out. Nobody would talk about it. It's like, your homeboy is out here spreading the good word. This dude you idolize, and you're not willing to talk about that side of what he's doing.
People are so afraid of it.
Yeah. Oh, This Is Important is what it's called. It's called This Is Important. It's very crass. It's very crass, like my
So we'd
last
like it. If
book.
you listen to
So you
this,
would,
then
yeah, if you like that show and The Righteous Gemstones with Adam
oh
Devine's
my
on both of
gosh.
those, then you will definitely like this last book because it's similar to both in very unfortunate ways, probably. But yeah,
Stop.
I
It's
was
great. It's
kind
a great
of
book.
taken back by that. I was like, why? How that cognitive dissonance is so strong. The
Yes.
stigma is so strong. If these guys are
Still.
like, love them, love them, love them. UFOs? Oh, hell
Yeah,
no.
people will
Hell
automatically
no.
just like it's insane. Like
Yeah,
I've
it's
had to bite
crazy.
I just am constantly like not telling people what I do. I mean, like I take care of my kids mostly, but I don't talk about my podcast a lot because there's that fine line where like, am I going to get made fun of for this? Am I going to like, but more and more people are talking about it. So that's what's
Yeah.
important now.
No, I know
I
that line well.
Yeah, you're just like trying to behave yourself and then you're like, "Oops, I said alien or I said UFO."
Yeah.
So
But then
final
you
call.
find people who are like super into it.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
I was in Collioure, France, researching this last book because, a big part is Dordogne region,
Yeah.
got to float the Dordogne River. And so we went south through the region to get like a snapshot of it. And I'm just standing on the beach with these people who spoke English. They were American. And her husband went back to grab something for their son who's playing with my kids. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, so you're researching a book? Is it about like the French language or something?" I was like, "No, it's about UFOs." And she just went, "Oh, you've got to talk to my fucking husband." And as soon as he comes back, he's like, he knew all the same
Yeah.
NPCs from this scenario. We had like the craziest hour-long
Awesome.
conversation about all the recent developments with
Yeah.
this or that. It's like there are people who are deep, deep into this too. And if we
Yeah.
don't be honest, if we don't talk about it, and
Yes.
standing on this little cove in the middle of nowhere
Yeah.
and the Spanish and French border, and all of a sudden I'm talking to somebody
Yeah.
who's like, he's wanting to dedicate his life to it. He's talking about starting like this media company because he's got a really strong
Wow.
media and computer programming background. Never
Do
would have
it. Yeah,
happened. Never
for
would have
sure.
happened if I wasn't like, no, I'm actually here to research UFOs in a strange place. I guess that's a weird place to do that.
Yeah, there's one in every group. That you'll find somebody that wants to talk about the weirdness, which I've finally come to terms with.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Pick your people. You can pick your nose, but you can
Absolutely.
also pick your people if they're not family. I don't
Dad
remember how
joke.
that idiom goes. That was a bad one.
So we have a final question from Deb, or Study of UAPs. Deb from Study of UAPs, I should say. What do
Oh
you
yeah,
think?
she's great. I know Deb.
Oh yeah, she's amazing. She's like she's like my first friend in Baltimore, and
Oh, cool.
so yeah, she's amazing. So
I
she wants to
feel
know what you.
that I sucks. I'm so isolated out here in Montana. Like I
I
get to meet
mean,
people in person
you
rarely,
could
but
still meet people. You just have to fly to do it. Like
I
the last
know
few
it's a
times,
lot of
I had to
work.
go to Columbia, New York to see my friends, basically. So you can do it.
Isn't it fun though? Like these
Oh yeah,
conferences that happen, and you're like, wow, I get to like see the face of someone
yeah. It's
who I've
weird because
only
like
known as
yeah,
like a little picture this big on Twitter or something.
yeah,
And
yeah,
got amazing experiences like that. It's cool.
absolutely.
Like Shane, met him in
Which Shane? There's a lot of Shanes in
uh
UFO land.
there are Shane Frakes, maybe is his
Yes, yes.
name.
Okay. Yeah.
Old vet
Yep. Oh,
Shane.
vet. Yeah.
Fantastic guy. We hung out in Phoenix in October, I think it was. Yeah, just a
Nice.
ton of people, James Fox and Mike Hanks and David Marler, Bryce Sable. Met a lot of great people at that festival that I've only interacted with. And sorry, I'm interrupting.
Oh, you're fine. No, you're totally fine. She wants to know what you think about Xenobot tech.
I don't know if I know what that is. Xenobot tech.
I'd be lying to say that I know
Is
exactly
there
what.
is there context? I could Google it real fast, but it probably won't be
Yeah.
a very informed answer. I always have this thing going
Oh,
to
what is
write
that?
things like that down. It's just this crazy like scribbles from talks and meetings. So I
Okay,
wrote
they're
Xenobot.
biological. There we go. Biological robots, she says.
I mean, again, I would have to do a little research before I gave an informed answer. But I will mention that I think inevitably biology and technology are going to collide and probably are already. I just mentioned the thing about the it's likely to be a switch between mechanical engineering and biological engineering to make these alleged beings. And I don't think all grays are these biological engineered things. I think legitimately some of them, I mean, obviously a whole civilization of them are future humans who make these things in their likeness, but give them specific abilities for specific tasks, which is something that this woman or this person, for some reason, I got the sense that it was a woman who wrote this. And I think that is maybe an aspect of what's going on, but I do think that it's created from the human genome in the likeness of these people to perform a certain task. One thing that's interesting that I've noticed is that's already being introduced in pop culture. If you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, I could have given you 2 examples, because there were 2 movies I watched, new movies that just came out in rapid succession that showed that exact thing, that like these spaceships are made from biological material. One of the most recent ones is the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, the 3rd one that just came out, where they're like cutting through this sloppy, wet, nasty, pus-filled thing to get into that space station. So I can't help but wonder, every time I see this, I'm like, check your conspiracy brain, check it, put it in check.
Same.
But are they doing that on purpose? Like the Atom Project and all. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Like, are they just using these? And that was a theme in this last book too, with the professor, saying how he worked on some of them, and he was married to Jodie Foster and stuff. like there's a way to do this, and it has to come through the thing that most people consume. So movies are probably a big part of that, because up until recently, we consume movies. Now it's miniseries. I'm always so annoyed when, like, I think I'm watching a movie and it ends after 45 minutes. I'm like, fuck.
You have to actually wait.
I got
you can't
5 more of these. I just wanted to be one and done. I want a short movie. So anyway, back to Dev's question. Yeah, I can't help but wonder, knowing nothing about xenobots at all, if maybe that's the beginning stages of this, like in the same way that we see the Japanese people getting off on little sperm collector machines, Japanese men specifically, and correlates with what happens to men in these abduction scenarios, is that sort of cross-temporal connection. Maybe this is too. I'll have to do more research, and I apologize I can't give an informed answer on that other than pop culture references again.
Yes. I mean, I would have to look into that, but yeah, there's a lot of people talking about that with the Greys. And curious about what the Greys are. See, Curious George, to say the Greys are made by future humans doesn't explain the claim that their DNA was a hybrid with an alien biome. And he says, sorry, I mean no disrespect. Yeah.
How could there be disrespect when we're asking questions?
Yeah.
Like, all we can do is ask questions. If he would have said, yo, motherfucker, I think you're stupid ass bitch, and then ask the question, that would be very disrespectful.
George would never say that.
But that's a good question. To say the Greys are made by future humans doesn't explain the claim. Oh, no. I think he dismissed what I was saying. No. What I was talking about is that these things that were discussed by this person who wrote that article, I think, are genetically engineered robots, for lack of a better word, droids, automatons, whatever you want to call them. In the same way that we see this in Pascagoula, where this robot comes out, this very clunky robot, that's probably the best they could do. Those are proximate humans who use that technology because they're scared to go get Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson, because they're dudes who are fishing would be like, what the hell's going on here? So they sent robots out. What I'm saying is that there are, what I think is the case, is that the Greys are actually us from the future, a very distant point in the future, but they are creating these things And that's what happened to be recovered and taken to the place where this woman wrote about her experience in this lab. That's what I was saying. So
Okay.
in the same way that we make robots now with wires and microchips, I think they're making these things for these tests. They're clearly not human. It's just a tube that goes to the lungs. It's a tube that goes to the stomach. Their toes are fused. You're taking human DNA, the human genome, and then tweaking it for something that can perform this task in the past. So I think that was just a miscommunication.
Very cool. Thank you for answering that. George is always in the chat. He's put up
But
your
next time, please start your question with "fuck you, bitch." Can you please fucking answer this question? Fuck you again. And mad disrespect. End it with mad. No, end it with mad disrespect.
And I'm disrespecting you if you haven't
And
noticed.
I'm disrespecting.
I would never let that happen.
What, you're
on air.
monitoring these? Oh, you got to let those through.
No, I some of them like get wild, but it's not like
Yeah,
I
that's true.
only draw the line.
People
Like I
do
had like
get
a
crazy
Nazi guy
sometimes.
pop in one time, and I was like, okay, you're kicked off, stuff like that.
That's
But,
icky.
but I try
I
to
was
let
at
people.
that Phoenix thing I was telling you about.
Oh wow.
And Alejandro Rojas was like, "That guy's a fucking Nazi. Should we kick him out of here?" I was like, I mean, if you want to, I'm on board. I don't like Nazis either, but
Who does? Yeah.
he left soon after that anyway.
Dang it. You didn't get to beat up any Nazis that time.
Well, I
Maybe
try
next
to
time.
avoid violence when possible, but I will make exceptions.
So watch out, Nazis.
Damn
Don't be
it.
coming
Now we're
to our-
talking about Nazis. The cops are coming again.
It's just the CIA because we're
They
talking,
don't
obviously.
they don't like pop
Obviously.
culture references or anti-Nazi talk. Duly noted.
So that was all my questions. I think that I wanted to ask, is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to cover, that it's been on your mind, or anything that's coming up for you, appearances or work-wise, that you would like to talk about?
I've kind of been taking it slow at the conferences because I've been traveling a lot lately. But I do have one coming up in late August. I think it's the last weekend of August in Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati, as we called it, because we were from the north, where obviously it wasn't nasty at all, even though the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught on fire in the 70s. But we throw shade like that. Otherwise, no, just little projects here and there. Still trying to just talk about stuff because that's all we can do is keep talking and talk to people who are talking about it. I feel like we're sort of getting to a breaking point where there's going to be a lot of members of the mainstream media, and I hate saying that because I think there's potential for there to be a flip where you're going to be the CBS News, and CBS News will be bankrupt in 10 years because they weren't taking this serious. Then you'll be the Walter Cronkite of the future, Priscilla.
There is a likeness, obviously,
Yeah, very much so. That's why I picked him specifically, not Katie Couric or someone. No, I think it's good that there are people talking about this. This came up in I'm a part of an elite circle of anthropologists.
You would.
It's funny to say that, but no, it's cool that there's a conversation I just got invited to by the same guy that reads at 3 times the speed on an audiobook as he's reading the book, who a lot of your listeners probably know or know of, but no, it's cool because we had this conversation about that, like what keeps us from being able to have these discussions in the mainstream media. And there's obviously a lot of factors, but it was easier when it was just 3 networks, 4 or 5 execs, and you just talk to them. The gatekeepers talk to them and say, we're not doing this. And then also the fact that they don't want to be disturbed, that people watch those shows because they don't want to have to challenge their worldview. And that's a big part of this political polarization we have, is that people want new information. They want to move forward. And that's what we're all doing here. But there's a big percentage of the population that doesn't want that. They want to get up in the morning, take the kids to school, go to
Yep.
church on
Yep.
Sunday, and just live this meaningless
Absolutely.
physical reality life with no challenge to their worldview.
Mm.
And that's a big part of this division that we're facing right now. So the more we can continue talking in whatever format we can, the more we're going to force those people to wake up and pay attention, because this is happening whether they want it to or not.
Absolutely. It's very traumatic to people when they like, if you think about everything that Grush said on, with the Ross Coulthard interview, and if people believe any of that, that had this tiny little world before, didn't question, they go to church, that's it. There's one God, how convenient, we just do this, we just do that, and it works out. Like, to question all of that you believed your whole life can be super traumatic. The term ontological shock is used for that. So I get it, but at the same time, I just can't imagine like not being curious. And it makes you miserable, but it also keeps you alive. So
it makes you miserable.
like why am I waking up at 3:33 or 3:00 in the morning wondering about this weirdness? Like, I need to be in bed, but like then you go down these rabbit holes and you're just like being it's like you can't get out of it. And it's like, it's so fascinating, but it's just like, you just end up doing it no matter what. You're always back. Even I always say, I try to ditch the alien stuff. I try to get away from the UFO shit a long time ago, but I keep ending up back there. Like, I tried doing just the witch stuff or just this stuff, just crystals,
which is fascinating too. Yeah.
But the thing
and
is,
there might even be some overlap there. Who knows?
I think that there is definitely an overlap between magic and physics, and all these dimensions that witches experience, and these trance states and such, that is connected to possibly contact with other entities. And we see it with psychedelic journeys as well. So
yeah, for sure.
But anyways, Vinny has a man crush on you. He wants to hang out with you so bad. He says it right there.
We'll send him over. We'll do butt stuff together and homage to the aliens. No, I'm kidding. I am a very straight male, married, 2 kids, but I'd love to hang out with them too. I don't know why I took it to a weird gay place there, but you said we could talk about anything on this show. So
I mean, things happen how the heart wants what it wants. We won't judge you.
He is a very attractive man, but
Vinny is ridiculously tall, and I'm ridiculously short. And when I met him,
is he that tall?
Dude,
How tall are
everybody's
talking?
tall. Vinny, put in here how tall you are.
Comment with your height right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm 5'0", so everybody's tall to me. But Vinny was
okay. It's a frame of reference thing.
Yeah.
I get it.
He's at least, in my mind, 6'1", 6'2". I might be wrong. I don't know.
No, that's legit. No, I think I appreciate that, and I think in Jeff Kripal's book,
love Jeff,
Authors of the
hang out with him in New
Impossible,
York.
he was talking about one of Jacques Vallée's early collaborators, Michel something, and he was like, you start out studying UFOs, and then next thing you know, you're going down this rabbit hole of Arab mystics and like Eastern philosophy and stuff. And I bastardize that quote because I suck at quoting things, but it's so true about this. You start out asking this one question or two. For me, the question was, are they our future descendants?
Yeah.
That was it. I was 8 years old, but that was the lens I was looking through. And then obviously a lot of other lenses crept up, and then an awareness of confirmation bias and selection bias. So 6'1", he is very tall. That's tall. I would consider that tall. So then you have to keep asking, or you just check out. But I think what we're talking about here is a very important distinction with the human race, that there are certain people who are just comfortable and they want to be comfortable. And there's certain people who are not, and they want to ask questions. What's unfortunate is you can have very inquisitive children that are getting beaten down by ignorance and racism and religion that keeps them from being able to blossom and explore that. Because I think everyone is imbued with that curiosity, but then the system itself mitigates that. It quells it. It quells that curiosity. And I was a part of that. I'm speaking from personal experience here, and maybe my tone of voice is alluding to the fact that I am still a little pissed about it, is that you're forced into this little bubble when there's so much more to explore. There's so many questions out there, but if you're not allowed to even ask those questions, what is life? You know, you go to work, you do the same thing, you come home,
Absolutely.
and there's nothing to challenge you. Challenge yourself. Think about these things. Think about these allegations, about what's happening with David Grush and these whistleblowers and everybody else. Go back to Bob Lazar, for God's sakes. I don't care how you feel about him. He was doing the same thing. Somebody asked about TTSA, early TTSA type shit. Challenge yourself, because this is a challenging phenomenon, and there's a lot of questions that are going to challenge us. You either get out ahead of that, or you fall behind, or you just trail behind to the point where you fall off the map entirely, in my personal opinion.
Wow, thanks for that. I think that's important for people to hear, especially people that are listening to this episode that are familiar with your work, or I don't know if it's weird for you to say fans of your work or admirers of your work, followers,
That's
whatever it is.
very weird. Let's not use
It would
those
be
words.
weird. People that have read your books, that know your work, you know, yeah, just stop questioning. I think that's the perfect ending point with that, unless you had something else you wanted to talk about.
I like that one of your commenters named Bob Marley.
Bob Marley always jumps in here and is like, he makes it fun.
Is that his real name? That's my question. Is that his real name?
Nobody really
Or
knows who Bob
hers,
Marley
or
is.
hers.
We don't really know who the real Bob
Could
Marley
be
is.
Roberta Marley as well.
This is true.
I mean, there's a lot of things that could be happening with gender nomenclature there, but
Yes, could be a cat, an AI
could
cat.
be a cat, could be an
Yeah.
AI cat.
I love
in
the thought of
fact,
that.
actually, I'm going with that as my primary thesis.
Sorry, we were
That
going to
makes
end with your
sense.
amazing talk about being curious,
6'4"
but
in heels. Them are some big heels. All right, wear those over. I might reconsider my heterosexuality if you wear those.
it's like a baby giraffe, I would imagine.
I love a baby giraffe in heels.
And there we are. We covered cracocide and bestiality.
Hydromorphic cracocide.
Oh, sorry. I was using the street term.
I wish I could find the guy that was just standing there. I hope
Yeah,
he
that'd
reads
be
the book at some
hilarious.
point. He's gonna be like, oh.
Dude, that whole scene though, I was laughing just like growing up Catholic and picturing Jesus just like, yeah, Dad, give me the cracocide. I'm ready.
I'm ready. Let's do this. Pin me up. I got this.
Yeah,
Pin me up and wake me up.
All right, so you have to read the book, guys. It is, linked in here. I'll put the Amazon link in the description. And yes, thank you all for showing up. Thanks for listening now, later, in the future, if you're gray sometimes. Also, thank you for listening to audio only. Subscribe, like, share. Is that what I'm supposed to say? Do all those things. And thank you
Smash
so
that
much.
like button.
Yeah, smash it.
Smash that like button. I hear
Thank
that
you.
at least 20 times a day. My kids are watching shit on YouTube.
Flick the like button. Just
Flick it.
Well, thank you for coming on, Dr. Michael, we'll call you, and hang on after I end the live so I can say goodbye to you. Backstage.
Yeah, and I want to get the inside deets on that
Yeah.
phenomenology app too.
Yes.
Oh,
what are you talking about?
not that you would ever tell me.
Cue siren. Cue siren.
My internet's cutting out again.
Uh-oh. On that note, guys, I will see you. Actually, I don't know when I'm going to see you next because I've been doing these sort of sporadic because of family time. So I don't know how I'm going to top Dr. Michael Masters, but if you know any authors you would like to have on that write weird books, let me know, DM me and all that stuff. And have a great night, everyone.